I'm sorry, it looks like we are going to have to do this in 2 parts. My roommate walked in, and I'm not good enough at editing to piece the 2 parts together, I don't think. So if it is one video, hooray! If it's not, don't be too surprised. Okay, so we were at seasonal depression. So, often correlated with women and younger people, and a lot of people experience it because sunlight is very vital in the production of vitamin D in the human body. Like, we absorb sunlight and we are able to convert it into vitamin D. I'm not 100% sure how it works, so if you want to delve deeper into that, go ahead, by all means, knock yourself out. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important for combating depression or depressive tendencies. It helps produce the happy chemicals that help us feel good. And a lot of people experience depression during the winter because there's less sunlight, it's a lot harder to produce vitamin D. And a lot of people actually start taking vitamin D supplements during the winter. Vitamin D can't hurt you, so if you think it's worth a try, nobody can stop you. It's an over-the-counter medication. Yeah. It's worth a shot. Not many people will tell you, no, don't use that. If you are using other medications, though, you might want to talk to your doctor first, because sometimes mixing medications, it's not really a good idea without a professional opinion. So, if you're not sure, it won't hurt to call your doctor. There are some ways to help combat seasonal depression through mostly exercise and getting as much sunlight as you possibly can. And a lot of people actually recommend exercising outside if you can. So, if you feel like you experience seasonal depression, there are definitely a lot of options out there to combat it. And we are off to this part of my notes. My notes are kind of everywhere, so I apologize for that. Alright, so depression is one thing that I definitely suffer from. I know I deal with depression, anxiety, and medical PTSD. Those are the 3 things I know I for sure have. There could be a few other things going on, but I don't know. They haven't manifested themselves in a way that me or my therapist or doctor have been able to recognize. So, those are the 3 I know I deal with. And depression is definitely the more prominent one, and the one I definitely understand the most within myself. So, my depression, looking back, I can see I've been dealing with it for a long, long time. It started around the 5th grade for me. So, for me, in 5th grade, I had this friend group, and it was starting to break apart a little bit, but everybody was in denial about it. So that was a little rough for me because I wanted to keep my friends together because I loved all my friends. I wanted to see us be happy together, but it wasn't quite working. And then I also started to hit puberty a little before everybody else. Like, I had developed acne starting in the 3rd or 4th grade. And by the 5th grade, I was essentially the only person with it, which made me a huge target for bullying from other girls in my grade. And that carried over into 6th grade as well. And that completely destroyed my self-esteem, essentially, because my friend group, who were my safety net, my emotional safety net, they were falling apart, so I didn't know who to talk to, because if I talked to one friend, another friend would be upset with me, and it's like, I want to be friends with all y'all. Luckily, most of that dissolved over time, especially when we hit high school, and we could think like proper people again, because middle school is a rough time for almost everybody. So if you're in middle school right now, my apologies. It does get better when people are able to think properly again. It's just a lot to take in when your brain's trying to develop and got all these hormones and chemicals going on. So I promise it does get better if you're in middle school. Or if you know someone in middle school, I promise it does get better. Alright. Yes. My experience, middle school was a terrible place overall, especially in 6th grade. Looking back now, I can also recognize that middle school was where myself and a lot of my friends developed our toxic traits. Like, I wasn't like severe abusive level toxic traits, at least not that I can recognize or see. It's just one of those things like someone tended to be really, really jealous of their friends having other friends and ignoring them every now and then or whatever. And so they'd kind of quietly backlash a little bit, like spread little rumors or tell falsehoods to them to make themselves look better and like the better option as a friend. And I know for me, most of my toxic traits were pointed inwards at myself because I didn't want to hurt others, but for whatever reason, when you're in middle school, self-deprecating jokes are funny. They're not. They're terrible. They hurt your mental well-being a lot. So if you do them, please try to stop. It might seem funny and it might bring a laugh, but at the end of the day, it just makes you feel worse about yourself. Like, I thought it was like, oh, my friends are laughing, mission accomplished. But once I started realizing that wasn't okay to put myself through that and started steering away from that, I realized how much better it is to just not do it. Because it also motivates your friends and loved ones to not make self-deprecating jokes or remarks about themselves, which is better for their mental well-being as well. So if you really want your friends and loved ones to take care of themselves mentally, you gotta take care of yourself mentally because it'll help rub off on them. Yes. And then also, another thing that really fed into my depression, my medical PTSD and depression are very close-knit because I am a cancer survivor and cancer is on the list of correlative diseases and illnesses. And the medication I was put on, the doctors did say that it did increase my risk of depression. And then also going through chemo for 2.5 years as a toddler stunted me developmentally, like socially, in the social aspect, because I was around a bunch of adults all the time. I could talk to adults, but nobody my age, and it was very disorienting starting kindergarten, and all my peers not understanding all these big fancy medical terms, or at least big to a kindergartner, and not understanding why someone would want to talk to adults or doctors and stuff. So that was very disorienting and definitely set me apart a little bit. And yeah, that medical trauma definitely fed into my depression because it also led to survivor's guilt when I encountered other people I loved who ended up passing from cancer. So a lot of those factors ended up feeding into my depression, and for the longest time I didn't recognize it for what it was. Because like by the time I got to high school and I was getting better at, not much better, but a little better at communicating my feelings, I'd remark to a friend like, man, I'm depressed, this bad thing happened and I'm depressed. And they'd be like, no, you're just sad. Depression is when you're sad all the time. I was like, oh, I don't want to be insensitive to people who have depression, because I was kind of in denial that I had depression, mostly because I didn't recognize it. Nobody sat down and told me this is how depression works, and nobody was able to recognize the little red flags I was giving off that I had depression. So that made for a joyous time in my life, trying to figure out by myself why I felt bad all the time, why I couldn't function well, why things that should be fun weren't fun. Just wondering, like, am I really a lazy butt for sitting in my bed for like 2 hours after I'm supposed to get up on a weekend? Or it's like, what's going on? It's like, I want to do these things, I just can't. And then did some research. A close friend of mine was diagnosed with depression and started talking about her experiences, her symptoms. And then, I don't know when it happened exactly, but somewhere towards the end of my freshman year into sophomore year, it clicked that I think I have depression. And I was too scared to really tell anybody about it. Like, oh no, I'm broken in some way. If you have depression, you're not broken. You just experience the world differently. If anything, it makes you more of a realist. Because if you have depression and anxiety, you're like, I'm speaking too fast, I apologize. If you have depression, and especially if you have it with anxiety, you tend to see the world differently. You tend to see all the potentially wrong situations and end up mentally preparing yourself for them. And then when they do happen, it's still disappointing, but it's like, whatever. At least that's how it's been in my experience. I'm not gonna say that's how everybody experiences it, because that's impossible for everybody to have the exact same experience 100% of the time. Just my little disclaimer right there. Yes. And I ended up experiencing lots of toxicity, especially in high school, from some of my peers, in my own household a little bit. I was never directly abused, so please do not worry about that. There was just... Alright, let me explain something real quick. Everybody has toxic traits in them. It does not necessarily make them a bad person. It does not necessarily make them an abusive person. Or at least not abusive in the standard sense that everybody knows from media. Everybody has toxic traits because everybody is imperfect. And the only way to deal with that is to, 1, try to recognize your traits within yourself. Because nobody likes a hypocrite. If you're going around saying, like, oh, you have all these toxic traits, but you have a slew of them yourself and haven't done anything about it, and then are in denial about it, nobody's gonna take you seriously about it. So please try to find your own toxic traits. You don't have to share with the world. It's like, oh, I have A, B, and C toxic traits in my life that I display on XYZ occasions. You don't have to go around doing that. Just find your toxic traits, recognize them, and then do your best to move forward and grow from them. It's a process, but it's worth it. It'll make you a better person. You will feel like a better person. And, sorry, there was a hair. And it'll allow people to take you more seriously if you do feel like you have to confront someone about their own toxic traits. Alright. Got to the point of how to help someone. Alright, first, if you have depression or think you have depression, there are some ways to help combat it that don't require necessarily talking to anybody about it if you're not to the point where you feel ready to. So one good way is through service. Like, helping others stimulates happy chemicals in the brain. Proven scientific fact. You can fact check it yourself if you don't believe me. Another one is setting realistic goals for yourself. Keyword realistic. If you're in middle school and you want to end up on the NFL someday, That's an awesome goal and dream. But baby steps are what make it possible. Like, oh, I'm gonna try out, and I'm gonna try out for, like, the A team or the varsity team, depending on how your school does that. Or I'm gonna bench press this much to help make me stronger. I'm gonna go run this many miles to help make me faster and build my endurance. Like, realistic goals like that you can achieve and feel good about and help you progress to a bigger long-term goal. Another helpful thing is going to pleasant events and settings. Like, if you really love going to the movies or watching local theatrical productions, if you can go, then by all means go. Like, if it helps you feel good, then yes. Or going to like friends' birthday parties and stuff, like something that helps you feel good and isn't going to physically endanger yourself or others, then by all means go for it. Another thing to do is stay engaged. Like, if you're part of a club, you might as well participate. You might as well get involved and do something. And as someone with depression, I know that's not the easiest thing in the world, especially when you're in the middle of a depressive rut. You don't want to do anything, you don't want to talk to anybody, you're just kind of floating around in existence. And it's terrible. But I also found that having a purpose in something not only builds my self-esteem, but it helps me feel less depressed because I know people need me, I can be useful, this is how I can be useful. So try getting involved in things, like actually involved and engaged. Another thing they say you should do is exercise. I've been getting into exercise recently. Physically, it hurts a lot of the time, but at the end of the day, it feels good because not only does it really help release happy chemicals in the brain, it also can be a good self-esteem booster because if you feel good, you're going to believe you look good, and realistically, you are going to look good. If you don't think you look good, it's going to help you think you look better, and you probably will look better. That's how exercise works. That's how the human body works. Alright, another thing you can do is maintain and build positive relationships. And I'm not talking like kissy romantic relationship things. I'm talking like everyday relationships you have with people, like your siblings, your parents, your friends. If they're not sending up a bunch of red flags saying like, hey, I'm a toxic individual, I'm a terrible person for you specifically to be around, if they aren't showing those signs, then by all means hang out with them, build a good, meaningful relationship. Find someone you can turn to when it does get hard, when you don't feel like doing anything, when you don't feel like reaching out. Find someone who can be like an anchor grounding person. I know I have a few people like that. There are a few people when I feel depressed or anxious, I send them a text message. I don't even have to talk to them in person. I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. This is really terrible. And they'll respond within a few hours usually, if not right away, saying like, hey, yeah, I'm not saying you don't feel that way. You feel this way for a reason. But here's the reality of it as someone who is not mentally ill. Here's how we see it. Here's how we would personally deal with it. Feel free to try it out. And they reach out in a way that it validates how I feel, which is very important. And they also help me realize, like, hey, I'm blowing this situation out of proportion, or like, hey, this isn't that bad, or hey, I should probably do something about it, or mention it in my next therapy session that I have felt this way. So that's what I mean by grounding people. They help me ground myself back in reality and realize, like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I did not realize it. Or, oh, I'm slipping into a depressive state and I didn't recognize it right away. So building those positive relationships with people is really important because it can potentially help you recognize what's going on in your headspace a little bit better and can help you stay more grounded in reality and not go flying off into the deep end, at least not as frequently. And the last helpful hint, if you are suffering from depression, is try to develop a regular sleep pattern. As a college student, I do not follow that one very well. I probably should. But as someone who also struggled with the insomniac and not wanting to get up in the morning symptom of depression, it can be really hard. So if you need to talk to your doctor about like, hey, I can't sleep or I can't get up, talk to your doctor and see if they've got any ideas, see if they need to put you on some sort of medication. Don't go on medication if you don't have to, but if it seems like it's a good option for you, then you should probably go for it. Because sleep is important, it allows the brain to heal, rejuvenate, it allows the body as a whole to heal, regenerate, rejuvenate, and be able to, and allows you to think and function as close to normally or as close to ideally as possible. Alright, here's how to help both yourself and other people you encounter who may have depression if are not diagnosed with depression. Number 1, limit toxicity. Whether it's through self-deprecation or hanging out with the wrong crowd, limit toxicity. You will feel so much better when you engage in more positive relationships with yourself and with your peers. And if it means having to find completely new friends, or if it means moving away from your family, whatever it takes to get you in a better mindset, depending on the severity of the people you're around, get yourself in a good place. You'll feel so much better. Number 2, validate how you're feeling. You are feeling the way you are for a reason. Whether it's because your brain isn't producing the correct chemicals or your nerves don't interpret them correctly, or you're simply in a very bad situation, your brain's responding the way it is for a reason. It's trying to protect you, or it just cannot function the way it needs to. So yes, you are feeling the way you are. That is how you are experiencing the world. Don't second guess yourself. If you feel sad or depressed on some random Tuesday, you're feeling sad and depressed on some random Tuesday. You don't necessarily need a big reason like, oh, my dog died, oh, my grandparents moved a few thousand miles away and I won't be able to see them anymore, sort of thing. You don't need a reason to feel depressed. That's how you feel. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As an outside individual, if someone says they're feeling that way, they are feeling that way. They don't need the big reason to feel that way. That's just how their brain is working. It's how their brain is interpreting their situation in their life. Don't undermine that. They have the ability to understand that, hey, I'm feeling depressed. Don't tell them they're not if they can recognize they are. And even if you don't think they're capable of recognizing it, at least let them speak their piece before jumping down their throat and telling them, oh no, you're just having a bad day, sort of thing. No, they are feeling this way for a reason. They might not be able to understand it for themselves, they just might know they feel terrible and their headspace is chaotic. If that's all they know, then help them get help to understand what's going on. You're not going to help them by saying, oh no, you don't feel that way, or, oh, you can't have depression because you have so many, I messed up, I'm sorry. Do not tell them that they should not be depressed because so many good things are going on in their life. Like, good things happen in everybody's lives. Good things happen in my life. But because my brain can't function the way it needs to 100% of the time, I'm going to feel depressed even when things are technically going good. Or at least, from certain standards, life is going good. My brain isn't going to recognize that 100% of the time. And you need to be able to recognize that if someone feels vulnerable enough or feels comfortable enough to be vulnerable and express those feelings, you're not going to do them any favors by telling them they should be happy with what they have. Of course they should be happy, and I'm sure they're grateful for what they do have, but that doesn't mean they're able to feel joy 100% of the time. So please, at least validate and recognize that they are feeling the way they are. Alright. The next thing I personally recommend is be compassionate. Don't be a jerk to them because they feel like expressing how they're feeling to you. If someone says, I'm depressed, don't make fun of them for it. It's not funny. It's not good for their mental well-being. It's going to push them down a darker, heavier road. You're only going to contribute to their issues by not being compassionate and understanding. If you don't understand how it works, then educate yourself. Hopefully that's why you're here. Hopefully that's why you're searching for anything to give you answers. Just make sure your sources are valid sources coming from professionals or from people who have experienced and are living through it themselves. I've experienced and am living it through myself. I am no expert, but I can at least relay my point of view, my experience, so other people can know they are not alone and potentially help people recognize that they may also have some issues that need resolving. And there's nothing wrong with that. So be as nice as you can about it. Don't try to fix their problems for them, especially if they are capable of solving their own problems. Be the supportive, compassionate friend or parent or loved one who guides them to help but isn't force feeding it down their throat, because that's not going to help. That's going to backfire on you. Another thing you can do is simply open up. If you're not sure if you should open up about your experiences, find a safe person and open up. Even if it's the smallest degree, smallest thing, like, hey, sometimes I think I feel this way. That's a step in the right direction. You don't have to go up to some random person on the street saying, like, hey, I'm having suicidal thoughts today. You don't necessarily have to be that extreme about it. Simply finding someone you love and trust and say, sometimes I don't feel good about myself. It's a step in the right direction, and if you're not sure if they're a safe person, it's a good way to test the waters. Like, testing people, seeing if they're ready to handle whatever it is you may come with. It's healthy and normal. You don't want to end up in a bad situation because you opened up to the wrong person. So please open up to people you trust. And even if it means opening up to them a little bit at a time, it's better than nothing. It's better than keeping it all bottled up inside and letting it fester and drive you crazy because you don't understand what's going on. And if someone's opening up to you and you feel like you have similar experiences, if it feels appropriate, I would say go ahead and open up to them too, and to help validate their feelings. Some people, they don't need to hear your backstory, they just need someone to talk to, rant to, whatever it is. So if you're not sure if you should open up, by all means ask permission. I mean, that's what my own therapist does. She'll say, can I share something? Or can I share my personal experience in a similar situation? it allows me to have that choice of like, do I want to listen to another perspective in another situation, or do I just need to release this? So giving that option, you can never go wrong with. The big thing is, if someone is opening up to you, listen. Do not cut them off. If they're going on and on, let them go on and on. It's healthy for them. They need to do it. Don't cut them short and say you're wrong about your own feelings. That's not how emotions work. You cannot feel their emotions for them. Only they know what they're experiencing. So listen to what they have to say. Hear them out. And a lot of the time, like, even for people who don't have a lot of mental health issues, if they're upset about something, they just want someone to listen. They don't necessarily need you to come in and fix it for them. They're not looking for a solution. They're looking for someone who's understanding and to give them a hug at the end, probably. Especially if they're adults or teenagers, especially older teenagers. A lot of teenagers don't get enough credit for their capacity to actually solve their own problems. Like, yes, they're still learning and will need some help here and there, but especially the older teenagers, they've had enough life experience, like, they can solve their basic problems on their own, and they just need someone to listen. They don't need you saying, like, oh, you should talk to your teacher about that, or, oh, you should tell Jenna that hurt your feelings and you need her to apologize. They probably already know that, they just need someone to listen. So please just give them the space to talk and let it out. If you have, like, little children, of course they're going to need your help. Because they're younger, they don't know what's going on necessarily, they don't understand how the world works quite yet. But if you're doing your job correctly as a parent or a guardian, they will be able to handle themselves just fine when they become teenagers, especially into high school and beyond. Most of the time they'll be fine. Offer your help by all means, but don't immediately dive in to fix it for them, because that feels invasive, and it makes, I know for me, it makes me feel like I am useless and worthless, because it's like, oh, like, so-and-so has to come to the rescue again, sort of thing. It's like, no, don't necessarily need someone coming to the rescue, just need someone to spill out my thought process and maybe get some opinions on, not someone who's gonna tear apart some random bully at school. If that's needed, they'll tell you. If they're at an age where they can communicate effectively, they'll tell you if they need you to do something. Alright. I'm sorry, this is taking a while. This is taking a lot longer than I thought. But it's all good things, hopefully. Alright, the last thing on my list of how to help is to give them time to process. Especially if there's a recent event going on, like if someone's relative recently passed away, or if someone recently underwent some form of trauma, they are going to need time to process what happened. And talking about it is a form of processing. It helps validate what they're feeling. Sometimes saying it out loud helps the brain process and cope a little bit better and understand what's actually going on. And it's one of those things, you can't rush it. Like, some things take years and years to process, and sometimes it requires a lot of help. So don't rush someone into thinking they have to recover from something immediately, or that they shouldn't still be thinking about something. If something happened and they're still thinking about it, it's for a reason, and it's probably because it was important to some extent it was important to them. It might seem finicky to you, but to them, it was important. It had some significance, or at least enough significance for them to think about it, and take the time to think about it. So, yes. And if you are experiencing something, give yourself time to process and cope. it's not a one and done deal. Like, there are things that I'm still trying to process from way back before I started kindergarten. Like, it's a lot sometimes, and it's okay. Process it as you're ready and as you are mentally capable of handling. Some things you're not capable of facing until you grow and learn and adapt more as an individual and as a human being. Sometimes you're just not ready to face it, but when you are, it's important to do it. So give yourself and others time to process and cope with whatever may be going on in their headspace or in their lives in general. Okay, that was a lot. At the end of the day, if you think you have depression, please, please, please reach out to someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be a typical person. Like for me, I waited till I was an adult, and then something large happened in my life. I will talk about it some other time. I don't have time to dwell and delve into it right now. But something big happened in my life, and I realized that now's the time. It's time to get off my butt and actually get some help. And I had tried coming to my parents a few times before, but nothing ever really came of it. I don't know why. Probably because I did not stay on top of it. It was like, tell them once, see if anything happened, and then nothing happened. And it's like, oh, nothing's gonna happen if I talk to them. My parents are loving people, don't get the wrong idea. They're awesome, amazing, loving, and they did provide me the help I needed. It's just, the first person I really opened up to about it was my high school counselor. After the incident, the next day I walked into my counselor's office, opened up, and it's like, this happened, and I have depression. I have suicidal thoughts sometimes. I have issues, and I need and want help now. And I didn't even need to call my parents. She sat down, let me cry, heard my side of the story, essentially, and then offered to call my parents for me, which I allowed her to do. I allowed her to talk to them privately. And my parents were then able to call the bishop of my church, and he had connections to people, and between bishop, my parents, and high school counselor, I had a therapy session for the next week and a doctor's appointment to talk about potential medications, which I ended up being put on a low-dose antidepressant, and it has been phenomenal. So don't be afraid of medication, and don't be afraid if it's not the right one for you on the first try. Sometimes you have to experiment a little bit with the doctor. Just be upfront and honest about it. They will do whatever they can to help. And if they aren't doing what they can to help, or you feel brushed off by them, you need to find a new doctor. And the same thing goes for therapists. You won't necessarily find the right match the first try, because they are different people, and some people click and some people don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just find someone you click with, feel like you can open up to, and feel like there's someone they can actually help. So, there's my little spiel on that. So yeah, if you have depression, you don't have to go through the typical channels to get help. Almost anyone can provide you with the help you need when you are ready. Just don't wait till it's too late. There really is no too late, but if it gets bad, please, please, please reach out to someone, anyone. There are so many hotlines out there. You can anonymously call, and in some cases text people, and they will talk you through stuff and do what they can to get you the help they think you should have and that you probably need. Whew, that was an emotional roller coaster for me. I think I have a headache now. Alright. So, I'm gonna call it a day here. Again, this is probably gonna be a two-part thing because of that intermission where my roommate walked in. So, have a fantastic day or night or whatever it is, wherever you are. And, yeah, take care of yourself, take care of others. Be kind, be compassionate, reach out for help if you need it.